Thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. And I see some familiar faces among here. It's always very exciting, and I hope that we could have a discussion after this presentation that maybe could put things forward, hopefully not backwards. As Åsa was saying, I'm a senior lecturer in education from Linnaeus University. It's located in the southeast of Sweden, if you don't know. My main interest in research is the implementation or enactment of different reforms. I just recently ended a project regarding the career pathway reform in Sweden with förstelärare, which some of you will be acquainted with. I looked at municipalities, how they enact this reform. And I also, we're just now closing a project with Ninni Wahlström and Daniel Sundberg, colleagues of mine, on the curriculum for compulsory school from 2011, where we have studied classrooms in the year 6. So what I'm about to tell you today is still, it's good that we have teachers and we listen to the teachers. Of course, my part, I have a background as a teacher, but it was many years ago, so I will give, of course, a university perspective, but also point at the different activities and how, from our perspective, where we work and how research and evidence-informed teaching and learning plays into what we do. So I will give. And first, I will start with a little context, a very brief expose over the landscape. I will present some definitions to know what we are talking about and point at different problems that are one of the issues that we're raising. We're discussing both forwarding aspects and backwarding aspects of evidence-based, the term evidence in this book that Åsa told you about. So I will give you a lot from that as well. And in the end, I hope we find time in just a couple of brief examples of how we see that teachers play in. But I leave most of the craft and the examples for the teachers in the afternoon, I think. So we live in interesting times, in a sense. So. But we cannot help but to realize that there are several things out there globally that are affecting us. I mean, just the other day we had Education at a Glance from OECD. So we always have these different benchmarking institutes, these different reports, especially in the Swedish case, telling us what we're good at and what we're not so very good at. We are getting better now in the PISA results, thankfully. So, but of course, there's a lot of different developments pulling and pushing into education. And those are very crucial when we are talking about times and even trying to understand the different trends and developments, both within school improvement at large, but also into the teaching and learning. We have, in the Swedish case, a new curriculum very much pointing in a direction towards a standard base. It's clearly from the standard-based movement put in. We have the discussions about the teacher professionalism. If something goes wrong with the students, then it must be the teacher's fault or whatever. I mean, we have to forward a good teaching with a good teacher education and educate our teachers. Along with this, we are now very much discussing in the latest report from Skolkommissionen about professional programs and what pathways there are. We just put in a pathway in 2013 where you move from one teacher to first teacher or expert teacher, but that was it, mainly. So we have all these different, and of course, different regimes in controlling and steering. I mean, all these are important. The accountability movement with the idea that you have to measure, you have to look into. And that's where also, of course, evidence-based research comes in this this landscape. And in the Swedish case, I mean, the system, as we have a decentralized system, as you know, accountability becomes a way and auditing becomes a way of steering and controlling the soft governance we used to say. not by the state. The state imposes different economic steering vehicles and efforts, and also legislation, of course. But the idea of looking into quality adds on to the systematic quality work, and also here evidence-based or evidence-informed teaching and learning becomes essential. This idea of research in schools, I mean, it's not a new idea, no, not at all. But I would argue that it's mostly a 20th century phenomena when we talk about research, the relationship between research and education. I mean, in the 19th century we had the establishment of different institutes, like Karolinska Institute, that they were mostly vehicles or bodies for higher technical or vocational educations. But we won't stick in the 19th century, but in the 20th century, in the 1960s and forward, where there were it was established different university branches. So they moved out different branches in towns, and that meant the separation between the research and the education. So the researchers, they stayed at universities. Sometimes they went out to university branches, but there was a separation. And suddenly, in the end of the 70s, you just go boom, talking about how should we research-based education. So that has been a very, very strong issue. And of course, in 1977, when the teacher colleges were moved into universities and different professional education, that also became the issue. How do we deal with that? So we're still struggling with that. That's why we're sitting here, of course, today. But this chart, which is made by Karl-Henrik Adolfsson and Daniel Sundberg, colleagues of mine, as a part of the Swedish Research Council program for setting up the Educational Research Institute. So they looked at different policy initiatives just to map and to see when does different reforms come. And the first ring here, red ring, of course, we have the forming of the Swedish National Agency for Education, and the idea of an interactive research model. Then we move on. We had curriculum reforms here in the 90s, and we move on to next that the National Agency of Education, it's split. So it's, I don't know how you say it in English, the Authority for School Improvement, I would say, perhaps, I don't know what it was called in English, was formed. And parallel to this, you have these Kulskolan here at Gothenburg University formed, and of course a new curriculum also actualized the idea of a new teacher education. Anyway, this authority, it was not very longly lived. It was put down in 2008, the next ring, and we had the school inspectorate informed. And here, once again, we could see that these different ideas of auditing, looking, following up quality, how it now pulls in, and we have this body looking into the quality of schools. The national agency then had a specific task to compile and to disseminate research on schools. We have the new Education Act, which we will get back to, about we should focus on a school on a scientific basis. And we also have different, although these programs for maths, these lifts, Matematiklyftet, initiated different initiatives from the authority to, of course, raise the knowledge among the teachers in teaching and how, and very much in different modules, how they could do this. And also connected to this idea of that the school moves into a more accountability structure. We also, I would say, that the Institute for Labour Market and Educational Evaluation, they have assigned to look at the policy initiatives and to evaluate different policy reforms. But in the end, in 2014, we have this idea of the Research Institute, Educational Research Institute. throughout the years, there have been different models. I mean, a very traditional model to disseminate research is like what we're doing now. Here is the researcher, the scientist from the university, who comes out to the teachers and then tells them, this is what I found. Perhaps sometimes this is what you should do. Well, so that's a very, well, a model that is quite linear. And of course, we also have the idea of dissemination through publications, different books, and so on, with a clear orientation towards that someone out there gets this information or the research. We also have this more like brokering, which we see that researchers, you put out research, of course, and you go to the practice and you say this you should focus on. And we have this more of brokering now together with the Educational Research Institute. And finally, a more interactive model, which we usually use in our research efforts and projects. And I'll just show you briefly. This is from Jan Håkansson and Daniel Sundbergs book Utmärkt undervisning. I don't know, have you seen it before? Some of you? Perhaps, yes, you've seen it, so you know about it. The idea of that research, of course, if we generate and compile research, we could explain, we could find results, and in dialogue with the practitioners who have an understanding from within and proven experience, we can create knowledge for change. That is, we can generate new knowledge in this interplay between research and practice in learning communities. And then we have this change based on these solid explanations from outside and from within. You have to tell me if I'm moving too fast or too slow, but I guess some of you from Sweden also will be very familiar with. We will talk next, but as I said, the Education Act in 2010 with the phrase that education should be based on scientific grounds and proven experience. And it's from that part we have moved on. Of course, we want to see an integration of the latest findings of research in schools and among teachers, because we want, of course, in the long run to change teaching and learning from what is considered to work best.